Hello, I'm Chris Williams from Read Comics They're Bad For You, the name of my YouTube channel. Or if you're watching this on BitChute, the name of my BitChute channel is Comic Freak. Have I ever got an article for you guys today? Game of Thrones showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss confirmed the worst suspicions of the fan base. Yes, you heard it. The two jerks who ruined Game of Thrones admit they weren't fit to actually direct the series. And this is a doozy as we read this article. After the disastrous final season of Game of Thrones, which left many fans furious at the flat conclusion to an epic story, writers, showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss have been extremely quiet, even going so far as to cancel their scheduled appearance at Comic-Con. At this point, every single scene, character arc, or lack thereof, and poorly planned plot point has been thoroughly dissected and dismissed by disappointed fans, critics, and YouTubers. Blame falls squarely on the shoulders of Benioff and Weiss, with Game of Thrones fans recognizing that the sudden shift in quality was entirely due to decisions made in the writing room, and were generally mature enough not to blame the actors or crew members. Benioff and Weiss are due to tackle Star Wars next, so we should wish them and their future cast and crew good luck. Not me. I just want them out of all of Hollywood. In fact, I want all of Hollywood out of Hollywood because I can't stand any of these people. But the two former showrunners are the ones I'm concerned about right now. But Benioff and Weiss emerged from their public hibernation to attend a panel at the Austin Film Festival and finally answer some questions from fans. The two were brutally honest, essentially admitting that they were never fully qualified for the job from the beginning. Heroic Twitter user @ForAura documented the Q&A session, and much of it reads like satire written by furious Game of Thrones fans. That makes me laugh. I mean, the actual showrunners, for once, actually tell the truth. This is amazing. They actually admit that they're morons. I'm so happy to actually hear someone from Hollywood actually admit how stupid they are, to the public no less. This must be a nightmare for anyone who wants to hire them now. I mean, Netflix must be thinking that we hired the two guys that are actually telling the truth, and Disney must actually be, well, blowing a sigh of relief at this point. No, Disney is still stinging from the rebuff they got from these two idiots, but this is hilariously funny when you think about it. I could go on, but we need to finish this article off. Benioff and Weiss still aren't sure why George R.R. Martin entrusted them with his magnum opus, as the two didn't have any comparable experience or even appreciation of the book's themes. Here are a couple of tweets describing their feelings. They are describing their pitch and how nervous they were. They pitched to Caroline Strauss, who has a reputation for being a tough pitch. They were very nervous because of how bad we wanted. David is describing the pre-meeting with George R.R. Martin, who was very questioning their bona fides, and we didn't really have any. We had never done TV, and we didn't have any, so we don't know why he trusted us with his life's work. It sounds like D&D are a couple of con artists, or George R.R. Martin is an idiot. I don't really know the real truth of this, but hey, this is quite funny when you think about it. Because despite these idiots, Game of Thrones was a great show, at least some consider it to be. I don't, especially in the final seasons. It seems that the two men aimed for a moonshot and somehow hit their target, suddenly tasked with retelling an immensely complex story without fully understanding it. In fact, Benioff once said, "Themes are for 8th grade book reports," which tells you all you need to know about his dedication to the art of storytelling. If you're wondering why a readily successful writer is comfortable dismissing themes as childish and unnecessary, it should be noted that Benioff's father is the former head of Goldman Sachs. Do we live in a meritocracy? Well, Bert Stevens still writes for the New York Times, so the two went on to admit that they had absolutely no idea how to work with costume designers, kind of important for a fantasy series, and described their experience making Thrones as an expensive film school. This would be funny if it didn't actually happen, and especially with how Game of Thrones ended, makes it incredibly sad. Here are some more of their tweets. They acknowledge that they have no idea why, after such a dismal pilot, why they went forward. Everything we could make a mistake in, we did. Script, casting, costume. They think HBO went forward because they had a lot of foreign pre-sales on the series. Yet another tweet, Dan is saying that Game of Thrones was basically an expensive film school for he and Dave. For example, they had no idea how to work with costume designers, and it was a huge learning experience. Good God, this sounds horrible. The more I read of it, on some level I almost admire their candor. They could have come up with excuses and defended their hideous creative choices, but they realized that there was nowhere left to hide. Fans were almost unanimously united in their disappointment, and little of the anger has evaporated in the months since. Oddly enough, the show was at its peak during the early seasons, when Benioff and Weiss were still learning how to do their jobs. The two initially downplayed the fantasy elements of the books, a decision that helped ground the universe before dragons started flying through the sky, and wanted to expand the audience to non-fantasy fans. This worked in their favor at the beginning of the show, and helped expand it into a pop culture juggernaut, but meant that the intricacies of Martin's lore were never explored. I used to think D&D just downplayed the fantasy elements because of budget, but now I know it was just because they were a couple of stupid fools. And now that they can't get away, they actually admit it. That's funny. Alright, here are some more articles. The moderator asked why they chose to write all the episodes by themselves. Because we didn't know better, David said. HBO wanted them to hire other writers, and they decided to hire Brian Cogman, their assistant, write 4 episodes. Dan wanted to remove as many fantasy elements as possible because we didn't just want to appeal to that type of fan. They wanted to expand the fan base to people beyond the fantasy fan base, to mothers, NFL players, the Faceless Men, the Lord of Light, the Night King, all magical elements of the story that were never resolved despite clearly being vital to the story. Hence, the prince that was promised never showed up, and Beric Dondarrion's grand destiny was teased but never delivered. Benioff and Weiss were elevated to success by HBO's polished infrastructure, the architecture of George R.R. Martin's books, and the eminent talent of every individual that surrounded them, particularly the actors. The moderator is asking them about their comments, acknowledging that they didn't understand the characters and the extra minutes helped them understand the characters better. Dan is saying that he let the actors redefine the roles, especially Macy, and they began writing for their actors. It is like the actor moved into the house and redecorated. He said he learned about the characters from the actors. They were exposed only when they ran out of material and had to finish the story themselves. Amusingly, the two never went online to read criticisms of the show from fans who clearly understood the books better than they did. Well, Benioff searched online once, but the results upset him, so he never did it again. They are expressing regret about putting the baby on the block of ice and him screaming. The mother was not happy because Dan just kept talking about close-ups of the baby's penis. They are very granular in details of shots, admitting losing sight of the big picture. Were you listening to the feedback to your fans as things went along? Dan, we really did not. Dan doesn't see the value of considering other people's reactions. Dave acknowledged that he Googled the show and it upset him. Dan, no. It seems that Game of Thrones' writer's room was a safe space, shielded from criticism and outsider perspective. In a way, it's a relief to finally understand why the show went in such a bizarre direction. There was no one there to tell Benioff and Weiss that their ideas were nonsensical. And there lies the root of the problem. No one stood up to these two idiots before they completely ruined what they were working on. They asked about not including women and people of color in the writer's room. They didn't have a writer's room, and there was one woman who wrote a few scenes. They decided up front it was going to be the two of them. David Hill is of Asian descent. Nobody was there to tell them to stop inserting random rape scenes for shock value, or that Euron Greyjoy was dreadful, or that the great houses of Westeros, finally putting aside their differences and crowning a wheelchair-bound shaman as king, was immensely, indescribably stupid. The article sums up my feelings perfectly on this matter. Kevin Smith once said, in Hollywood, you just kind of fell upwards, and I think that's a pretty apt description of how Benioff and Weiss created their hit show. But even better analogy comes from Hunter S. Thompson, who famously responded to an impending deadline by ripping the tattered, intoxicated scribblings from his notebook and sending them to his editor, producing his famous article, The Kentucky Derby is Decadent and Depraved. Thompson described his accidental success as falling down an elevator shaft and landing in a pool full of mermaids. Well, Benioff and Weiss have swam with the mermaids, and hopefully they learned how to keep their heads above water, because there's another elevator shift down below, and at the bottom is a swamp full of ravenous, flesh-eating Star Wars fans. Not anymore. As others have said, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy and Disney, the Star Wars brand is now a fading franchise and the fans don't really care anymore. Let's hope they learned how to talk to costume designers at least. Update. According to Deadline, Benioff and Weiss have wisely walked away from Star Wars, citing time constraints. Having signed a 9-figure deal with Netflix, there are only so many hours in the day, and we felt we could not do justice to both Star Wars and our Netflix projects. So we are regretfully stepping away. Or, like I've said before, they're walking away from Star Wars because they see it is a fading franchise, and they've already taken several shots to their own reputations, so they don't need any more. And that's why I think they walked away from the Star Wars deal. Now, if you like this video, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed, because YouTube is going around unsubscribing people, so make sure you're still subscribed. If you're watching my videos but you have not subscribed, please subscribe to me. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Read Comics, They're Bad For You. Then go over to BitChute and subscribe to my BitChute channel, Comic Freak. Hit that bell for notifications, hit that like button, and leave some comments down below. And could you please share this video, share it on Twitter, and share it on Facebook. Share it anywhere you think it would do the most good, because YouTube is not going around promoting their YouTube creators anymore, and it would really help me if you could please share this video. Now listen closely, because it's plug-in time. Keep checking back in future videos for more information on my own upcoming independent comic book, Scumdogs. I'm Chris Williams, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another video or review.